Today I'm going to show you a 1880s coin bank. These were made around the 1880s. Most people I've spoke with that digs in old garbage dumps from years ago has found these in garbage dumps from the 1880s. And that's how we know that these date to the 1880s, because a lot of these pieces of them was found in the 1880s garbage dumps. Back in the old days they didn't have landfills, so people would take their garbage out and dump it in their backyard and cover it over with dirt. And the discovery of some of these coin banks has helped us date these coin banks back to the 1880s from finding parts and pieces and broken pieces of these in the old garbage dumps. So what this was it was a coin bank for kids that was looking to save money. And what they would do is they would put these banks together, and they would be a trick to taking them apart and putting them back together. This way, if a kid took their bank apart, then it would be hard for them to figure out how to put it back together. And it was sort of a mystery and kind of like a unsolved puzzle to a small child that didn't have the knowledge of knowing how to put these back together. And this is how parents would know if they got in the coin banks. So this is one. Now this one, you take it apart with a screw at the top. And what it does is these sides collapse. Now this panel here will come off, right along this groove right here. You got a front and a back panel, and then you got the side panel, so it comes apart into four pieces. And then you got the base that comes loose separate. You got the roof that comes apart separate, and then you got this little steeple here, and then you got another roof. And all these sections just kind of fall apart when you take this screw out. And it makes it extremely hard for a small child or a young kid to put it back together. So this was a way that the old people back in the old days made the banks, and they would make them out of usually cast iron, but they would cast these out. And this one's got the original paint on it. A lot of these you find don't have the original paint in it, but they'd fit up to a quarter size coin. But they were generally hand painted with a old style paint. I'm not sure if it was lead paint or what type of paint it was, but they were just roughly painted, and they were usually painted in two basic colors. You usually find them in red and yellow or other basic colors like this. These are very heavy, and they're kind of unique and kind of cool to set up and just look at if you like old stuff. Now, some of these parts looks like they've used a black. Now, I don't know if they used a third color or if that was later on added, but generally most of them has only got two colors. But they hold quite a bit of change for the size of them. I'm assuming this was probably a toy that was for the wealthier kids that really had money to save. Back in the old days, a lot of people didn't have money to save, so most of the wealthier families would use a coin bank like that for their kids. But this one's got holes all in it so you could see the coins in it. It's kind of a unique little piece, but a lot of people is unsure what something like that's usually worth. I'm not real sure neither. I've seen a lot of antiques and a lot of stuff go across different markets and stuff. Generally something like this is usually just whatever a buyer thinks it's worth. Sometimes it'll take several years to get a premium price out of something like this. So it depends on how fast you want to move something like this if you're selling one. It also depends on the buyer and how much they're willing to spend on something like this. Generally these are just decoration items now, and but some people do collect them, and they are pretty unique. Now some people find these cleaning out old houses and don't know much about them. Some people throws them in the garbage and stuff. They are worth a little bit of money. So if you do come across one, do save it, put it on the collector market, pass it on to someone that is interested in having such a piece in their collection. I'm all about saving antiques, passing them on. Even if it doesn't mean much to you, pass it on to someone else that it does, because a lot of this stuff is getting tossed in the garbage, and we're losing a lot of the antiques off the markets this way. A lot of people don't know what it is, and they just toss it away, and a lot of this stuff is starting to become rare because a lot of people throws it in the garbage. But it is nice to see these being passed back out into the market again if anybody has any laying around. This one's one that I generally just set up and look at for decoration purposes. It's got some wear, but it's in extremely good shape for its age. These are getting more uncommon to see because a lot of people think they're just a toy and they just throw them in the garbage and they don't think much about their age. So they are becoming less common to find. But these little banks like that is worth money. So if you do come across one, do save it and pass it on to someone. There are not too many I've seen that's got all the paint on it like this. Most of them's usually been repainted, or someone's stripped the paint off of them, or the paint's rusted off of them. Now there's all different kinds of old banks. This one's actually a bank, but now there's different kinds. There's all different shapes and styles of coin banks from back in that time period. But now there are also fakes that's made, reproductions and stuff like that. The older ones would generally be casted more smooth. You won't have the rough texture. Most of the reproduction ones will have rough edges, especially on the insides. Now if you look closely on the insides of these, they're casted with a real smooth casting, and there's no rough texture. Everything's a smooth cast on them. Generally you don't find any cast lines. Most of your reproduction coin banks has cast lines in the casting, and most of these older ones don't. They're generally really smooth, and there's very few flaws in the casting, and most of the parts, the dimensions are very precise on the corners and the shapes and stuff. So there's one way to tell an original. Generally they're put together with an old style screw or an old style rod or something. They're usually got a lot of paint stuck on them. If you do find some of them that does have paint, they generally have a lot of paint on them. Layers of paint. Usually they've been painted over the years. But usually they're really smooth, You don't find any rough texture. The coin banks that you find, that your reproduction has usually got a very grainy feel to them. Got a lot of cast lines, mold spots in them. These will be extremely well molded, and the metal will generally have a really dark look to it. But that is how you tell the difference in them. But a lot of this stuff, the way we date a lot of antiques is by talking with people that digs in old garbage dumps and documents stuff that was thrown out years ago. These old trash dumps actually helps us indicate the exact time period a lot of stuff is from. Bottles, old toys, stuff like that. To some people, digging in an old trash dump from the 1800s or 1900s early period doesn't mean much to some people, but it means quite a bit to people that's in the antique market, because those small fragments of broken pieces and stuff helps us indicate the era that a lot of these antiques was made in, because some people will question it and some people will try to say that they were made in different eras and different periods, but the trash dumps don't lie. You can go into a trash dump and you can generally tell from that area and the time period when that house or that period was inhabited. And by digging that trash dump and going through the layers, you can tell exactly the year and the period that a lot of stuff was made. So that is how a lot of antique collectors and stuff finds out the correct era a lot of this stuff is made in. So that is the way and the history on some of this stuff, some of the tips and tricks on collecting and buying this kind of stuff.